Hello and welcome. My name is Sara Harberson and I'm America's College Counselor. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. We're going to be doing another rapid fire Q&A. So if you have any questions about the college admissions process, you can ask it in the comments section below the live feed. And as usual, we are streaming live on both of my Facebook pages, Sara Harberson and Admissions Revolution. I encourage any student, parent, college counselor, teacher out there, let us know where you're coming from. I always love to hear what state you're coming from, if you're coming from outside the United States. Also, what part of the process you're in, what role you play. If you're a high school student or a parent of a high school student, I would love to hear what year of high school. And also anything that you're facing right now, any challenges, any questions that you have, that's what I'm here for. We do these Facebook Lives every single month, and they have been going strong for several years. You can actually access all of my Facebook Lives on my admissionsrevolution.com website, but you can also check them out live or the recording just by looking at my Facebook pages for Sara Harberson and Admissions Revolution. There's a lot going on in the news in college admissions right now. Some students had issues last week taking AP exams. The College Board did make some adjustments for this week of AP exams, but I know that there were still students who were still reeling from what happened last week. We have colleges making announcements every single day about testing requirements for the coming year and beyond, and whether classes will open up in the fall. This also affects those families who are trying to visit colleges at the same time. Right now, they can only do virtual visits. You will find that a lot of colleges are offering virtual tours and virtual information sessions, and that could count as demonstrated interest for a lot of those students who are going to be seniors. I see that questions are already beginning to come in. It's great to see you guys here. I always wonder, 9:30 p.m., at least on the East Coast, but you guys always show up and I love seeing you all. So the first question is it preferable to declare an area of study major rather than saying you are undecided? So I would say, generally speaking, when a student is applying to a college, whether it's a university or a small liberal arts college, they have an opportunity to list what major or majors they're interested in. Generally speaking, the admissions officer, when they're reading your application, they are looking at the major or undergraduate school that you are interested in before they open up your application. So it absolutely will impact your application process depending on the major that you list. I always tell the families and the students that I work with that no matter what major you list, you want to make sure that you have evidence to back that up. Evidence in terms of your achievement, your passion, and commitment for that particular major. Should you list undecided? I think for a large state university where you're just applying to the liberal arts program, listing undecided may not have a very big role. But as I mentioned, those admissions officers do pay attention to it, and they're looking for different things in the application depending on the major you list. I think for undecided applicants, when I was an admissions officer for a very long time, it was hard for me to latch on to those students and really visualize them in the same way as a student who listed their major. So I'm a big proponent of listing a major, especially if you have the evidence to back it up. Next question. Hello, since the SATs are being postponed and in some cases disregarded entirely, are there any other specific activities you recommend doing in order to improve appearance of the college applications? Mother and junior daughter from California. It's great to have you both here. So there are a lot of colleges announcing that they are waiving the SAT or ACT requirement. Not all colleges have done that. I would say probably about 100 colleges so far. I anticipate more will continue to make similar announcements as we go through the summer. But for a student who is not submitting test scores, or for a student who took the SAT or ACT once and it wasn't wasn't what they had hoped it would be. You want to make sure that your high school transcript is the strongest it can possibly be. For a lot of schools, they went pass-fail at the end of the school year. For some schools, they gave the students the opportunity to choose whether they do pass-fail classes or pass-fail grades or get actual grades. But junior year grades are going to matter. If not for the final grades, at least, first semester grades are going to be looked at very carefully for those colleges that are waiving the SAT and ACT requirement. I would also say that senior year classes and grades are going to matter even more. I anticipate that we will see extended deadlines for the early round and the regular decision round. And so that will mean that more of a student's senior year could come into the evaluation process. So I would say focus on making sure junior year ends strongly, and also the beginning of senior year ends up being a strong year as well. In terms of what you can do over the summertime, there are a lot of limitations still going on across the country. Students who thought that they had a summer job or a summer internship or research opportunity, that may not be available or exactly the way that they were hoping for. I would still reach out to those employers, those universities, those companies that you had opportunities waiting for you, and see if you can do anything remotely if things continue to be restricted. But also think about what is going on within your household, within your family, and anything that you can do from home. I was hearing about an Application Nation student who is just finishing up her junior year, and she has created this incredible garden in her backyard, and she's composting as well, and she's doing everything on her own. And that in and of itself can be a summer activity, especially if it is actually part of what your family is eating on a regular basis every night for dinner. So be creative, guys, and I encourage you to do that. Next question. Junior from New York. If ACT score is not commensurate with the high GPA, is it advisable to go test optional rather than submitting a score? Live in New York and ACT is now canceled for June. Okay. So generally speaking, for any college that has a permanent test optional policy, or for a college that is going test optional for this year, for the class of 2021, because of all the testing cancellations, the students who are going to be the most competitive, who do not submit SAT or ACT scores for those test optional colleges, are going to have incredibly strong academic records. If you have a really strong record, both in terms of your grades and also the curriculum, the classes that you've been taking from 9th grade on, that's going to matter the most. And you should not be disadvantaged in the process as long as your record is really strong. What I often say though is if you have an ACT or an SAT score available, maybe you were able to take one before all of the cancellations happened, look at that score. It was probably your first time. It's usually your first time. Your scores aren't as high as what they could be, but look at that score and compare it to the average middle 50% range for that particular college that you're interested in, or all the colleges on your list. If your score reaches that middle 50% range for the SATs and ACTs, that tells me that you probably are going to be okay by sending your scores. If not, then I would withhold them, because a lot of colleges and universities are going to be waiving that requirement to begin with. Next question. If a student is not as strong in math, but excellent in reading, writing, and science, do you think ACT or SAT would be better? We'll do practices of both. If a student is not as strong in math, but is strong in other areas, which test should you take? I think you're right. I think you really have to take a practice test in both the ACT and the SAT. So for those students who are finishing up sophomore year, for example, I always recommend begin test prep the summer between sophomore and junior year if you can. But before you even begin test prep, you want to take a full-length practice ACT and a full-length practice SAT just on your own. You just want to make sure that you're following those time restrictions so that you get an accurate score on that practice test, and see which test feels better, and usually your scores will reflect that. With the ACT, Your composite score is made up of 4 different sections. So math, science, English, and reading. So even if your math score is lower than your other 3 sections, the other 3 sections could actually bump up that composite average. But definitely take both practice tests just to be sure that you're taking the right test moving into junior year. Next question. Is it more challenging to get into a competitive graduate school for students who graduate from colleges with an open curriculum? Do the lack of gen ed requirements hurt their applications? Is there any other downside to open curriculums? Okay, so an open curriculum is going to be where the student goes to a college. So the most common or well-known college with an open curriculum would be Brown University. But actually my alma mater, Hamilton College, now has an open curriculum. I don't see that being an issue. Both institutions send students to great graduate schools and professional schools, but you just want to make sure that if you're thinking about a particular graduate program or professional school after college, that you are taking your prerequisites in college. So for example, if you go to Brown and you want to go to medical school, with an open curriculum, you're pretty much able to take whatever classes you want as long as you're fulfilling your requirements for your major and filling up your class schedules every single semester. But if you're thinking about applying to medical school, you have to have those pre-med, prerequisite classes to be able to apply. And ideally, you're doing that in college. So that would be a year of biology, a year of chemistry, a year of physics, and a year of organic chemistry. And also, I think calculus is also required. So you just want to keep those in mind if you are thinking about a particular professional program or graduate school after college. Next question. What are you hearing about how colleges are managing gap year requests from current seniors and how this will impact the class of 2021? I seem to get this question for all of my Facebook Lives and now with my Instagram Lives on Friday afternoon. It's a great question, and I'm learning more and more, Vanessa, with every day that passes. So I just finished a call with Application Nation Class of 2020. Those are those families with graduating seniors. And there are a handful of colleges that are being incredibly flexible. I'm thinking of Williams College, for example. They extended their enrollment deposit deadline, I want to say, to about June 1st, maybe a little bit after that. So that's later than what most colleges had, which was a May 1st enrollment deposit deadline. They're also telling those seniors that were admitted to Williams that if they want to request a gap year, they can do it a week after that enrollment deadline, and that they're going to be very generous with granting those requests for a gap year. I would say Williams is in an unusual position. Their endowment is enormous, even though they are a small liberal arts college. I think Williams is more of the exception than the rule. We heard, I think there was a news report about Georgetown University, for example. There were students trying to contact their admissions officers, trying to get information about how to request a gap year. The admissions officers weren't even getting back to the admitted students. And in some cases, they were saying, or at least prior to what's going on right now, they were making it clear that they weren't going to be approving every single request. So I think it depends on the college or university, but generally speaking, these colleges have to be careful. Williams is the exception. Their endowment might be over $1 billion for such a small college, but most colleges and universities have to be careful not to grant too many gap year requests because they plan their enrollment model a year ago, basically. And what they usually are basing that enrollment model on is prior years. You know, how many students ended up getting admitted, how many students ended up getting enrolled, how many students were waitlisted, how many students in the past have requested a gap year. And in the past, it hasn't been that much. And so the enrollment model is pretty much set for most institutions. If they approve every single request that comes in, most institutions, if they approve all of these gap year requests, then that's going to open up a big hole in their incoming freshman class. And that would mean they'd have to go to the wait list and start admitting students off the wait list pretty late, well into the summer. And so for a lot of colleges, they just can't take that risk. So number one, I think that colleges are going to have to be strict about not approving every single gap year request. That's number one. And number two, even though there are a lot of students and families talking about the gap year as an option more than a typical year, I think in the end, those requests aren't going to be as high as we think that they're going to be. I think they will be elevated compared to past years, but in the end, I think most students want to start their freshman year, whatever that's going to look like. Next question. Since many students did not get to visit schools, do you think some schools might eliminate early decision this year? I don't think they're going to eliminate early decision, but as I mentioned, I think they might extend the deadline for early decision. I think a lot of colleges are going to have to do that. I don't think they're going to eliminate early decision because those colleges that have early decision, they need early decision. There is a clear reason why every single college or university that has early decision has it. And that is simply because they don't have the kind of yield that they want. Yield percentage is the percentage of students who accept the offer of admission. And for any college, even a highly selected college like the University of Pennsylvania or Cornell or Washington University, these are highly selected colleges, very desirable, very well respected. They have early decision to be able to fill a significant portion of their freshman class before they even go into regular decision. Because once regular decision happens, those students that get admitted to their institutions are usually getting into other institutions as well. Sometimes colleges that are ranked higher or more appealing to those students. And it's really hard to get those students to enroll. So early decision is a necessity for almost every college or university that has it. So I don't anticipate them eliminating it, but I do anticipate seeing those deadlines being extended well beyond November 1st. Most early decision deadlines are November 1st. I can see the colleges announcing right before things start to get busy or right before the deadline or even right after. They'll probably be making announcements that they're still accepting applications beyond the deadline. Next question. Should my junior, who's going to be a senior in the fall, take the hardest honors classes with possibly a B or less hard with all A pluses? Okay, I get this question a lot. I would say that if your son is, or junior, I'm not sorry, I don't know if it was a daughter or a son, if your child is looking at the most selective colleges out there, there's going to be an expectation that that student is taking the most challenging classes that are offered at the high school. And ideally, in all 5 core academic subjects are very close to that. If the student is looking at just maybe a little less selective colleges, maybe colleges that have acceptance rates of 30, 40, 50% compared to 20, 10, 5%, then they probably can get away with taking a slightly less rigorous curriculum and doing really well. So you have to do what's right for you, what you can handle, but you also want to be aware of what the colleges on your list are really expecting. And those highly selected colleges, they're expecting the most challenging curriculum that's offered. And ideally, those students are getting really good grades as well. But that's a lot of pressure to put on students, and especially right now, so you have to do what's right for you. Next question. Have you heard anything about the likelihood of lower financial aid offers for the class of 2021, public versus private? How are schools weathering COVID-19's financial challenges? This is a really important question. There are a lot of families that don't apply early decision because they want to see what offers of admission the student gets and also what financial aid offers and merit scholarships the student gets as well. But going into the coming admissions year, the coming academic year, we've got to be aware that there are most colleges and universities are going to have to be really, really careful. They're not going to be hiring new staff members or new faculty members. There could be people taking pay cuts. I just heard of a number of presidents and college coaches having to take pay cuts. So we want to be aware of that. I would generally say, as you formulate a college list, you want to probably include, if you're looking for merit money or good financial aid, you want to not only be looking at, what has happened in the past, but look at the endowment, look at what effect the endowment has felt because of COVID and because of the stock market, and the economy in general. Because you can't just say, well, the public universities are going to be struggling and the private ones are going to be okay. It really depends on the financial security and stability and the endowment of the institution, sometimes well before COVID even hit. So I would say have a mix of both public and private universities and colleges on the list, because you don't know what's going to happen. With public universities, they might get less funding from the state, for example, if they're a state university. For private colleges, they might have an enormous endowment, or they might have a very small endowment and might be impacted more. So just making sure that you have a variety of colleges on your list. But in the end, I still believe that financial aid and merit scholarships will be the priority for these colleges and universities. So they will cut back on other things on campus before they're going to cut back on financial aid and merit scholarships, because they know that if they don't provide the kind of financial aid packages and merit scholarships that families are expecting, they're not going to be able to yield those students and actually have a full freshman class on target. All right, so we got some time for a few more questions. Do you anticipate those schools who have early action only moving to include early decision? That's a good question. I've been thinking about that too, Teresa. I think that if a college was on the fence about it, they might switch to early decision. It's interesting. If we look at Boston College, for example, if you've been tracking Boston College, last year, they decided to make their early action policy completely non-restrictive and open. And what ended up happening last year was they got so many applications through early action, but I don't think they saw the results on yield. And so this past year, they made a big change to early decision. Early decision is a way to really secure a class. And for a college or university that struggled to meet their enrollment goals this year, they might be looking at switching to early decision. But you'll find that early decision tends to be much more common at those private colleges and private universities. There are a handful of public universities that have early decision, but not many. William & Mary is one of them. If a school is test optional and your scores are around the 25% mark of that school's listed scores, should you send your score or not? Shelley, I believe that if you're in the bottom quarter of your test scores match up with the bottom quarter of the class, I would not send your test scores if that college has a test optional policy. The reason for that is that most students are not going to be what I call tagged in an applicant pool. They're not going to be a recruited athlete. They may not be coming from an underrepresented background or underrepresented state in the country. They're just regular kids doing extraordinary things. That bottom quarter of the class that gets admitted, or bottom quarter of test scores that get admitted, tend to be students that are what I call tagged. So they tend to be those recruited athletes or students coming from underrepresented backgrounds or underrepresented states. They might be, if the legacy applicant pool is very important to that college, there might be more legacy applicants in that bottom quarter, getting those scores in that bottom quarter. So if you don't have a special tag, and that's most of our kids, and that's most of us when we apply to college, I would be careful with sending your scores. I generally say that I want your scores to match up with that middle 50% range unless you fall into one of those unusual categories. Are students who apply early decision less likely to receive merit scholarships, since applying early decision basically implies the student can pay full tuition? Okay, there's a lot in this question, if we can just hold on just a moment. So when colleges have early decision, it is a binding decision. It means that the student is saying to that institution, you are my first choice, because if that student is admitted, they are technically bound to attend. Now, Not every student who applies early decision can pay the full tuition. So a lot of colleges and universities that offer early decision are also going to be offering financial aid offers or packages. And they often will say that your financial aid award, your need-based financial aid award, is not going to look any different whether you apply early decision or regular. However, Amy, you bring up a good point, because if a college has early decision and they offer merit scholarships, a lot of times they're probably not going to give those early decision admitted students those merit scholarships. They might throw one or two a bone here or there, but for the most part, they want to hold on to those merit scholarships for regular decision or if they have early action. So it is possible to get need-based financial aid if you apply early decision. It's even possible to get a merit scholarship, but almost always those colleges are going to hold on to those merit scholarships and give them out to students who are admitted in regular decision or regular decision in even early action if the college has it. A couple more questions. What impact does legacy have? Well, if you asked me this question 10 years ago, I probably would have a different answer. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, if you were a legacy applicant, it carried a lot of weight in the admissions process, whether you were looking at a highly selective college, a very selective college, or even a selective college. Now in 2020, those colleges and universities that really valued those legacy applicants, I think they still do to some extent, but not at the same level that they used to. And there are a handful of colleges out there that no longer will factor in legacy, that legacy advantage. Johns Hopkins, for example, is one of those, I believe. I could be wrong. I'm thinking maybe I'd have to double check about Johns Hopkins, but there are a handful of colleges that basically say, at this point, we no longer will give legacy applicants an advantage. I don't think there are going to be many colleges that come out and say that because they're worried about their alumni network. But for the most part, you can't rely on that legacy consideration like you used to years ago. All right, next question. How different is it to apply as a science major? And maybe if you guys could find out about Johns Hopkins, I don't want to give people the wrong information for some reason. I just want, if we could just double check that live, that would be great. All right, next question. How different is it to apply as a science major versus an English or history major? Okay, so this is a question I get asked a lot as well. So in general, those science majors, whether you're applying to an Ivy League university or a state university, those science majors, they tend to present differently in their application process. They tend to be strong students across the board, but particularly strong in science and math, and those two have to go together. So an admissions officer is going to be looking at the curriculum and the grades in science and math for all 4 years of high school. And if testing is available, they want to see strong testing across the board, but they're going to pay particular attention to the math score on the SAT or the math and science scores on the ACT. If you're applying as a history, English, or humanities major, the admissions officer is going to be looking at different things. Has the student taken the most challenging classes in that academic area? Are their test scores reflective of their strengths in the humanities? So admissions officers are definitely readjusting how they're evaluating your application based on the major that you list. All right, one more question if we can squeeze it in. If a school is stating that they are not using standardized tests, does that mean you should not submit the scores, especially if the student did very well? This is a good question I'm getting asked every week about as well. So all the colleges that are saying that we're waiving the SAT or ACT for the class of 2021, or they're saying that they're going test optional, it doesn't mean you can't submit your test scores. If you did extremely well on the SAT or ACT before COVID or after COVID, whether you're a younger student or one of the students who are going to be seniors, if you've done extremely well on your SAT or ACT, you can still send those scores. In fact, those colleges are going to love you for that because they have adopted this test optional policy, whether it's for a year or for multiple years. But the fact is, they still have to report average test scores for their incoming freshman class. They report it on their website, they report it for their bond rating, for their Moody's rating, for for grants, for US News and World Report, for all those other rankings. So they want those high scores. So if you've done well, make sure to send them. Even if a college is test optional or not, they're still going to want those high scores.
You were correct.
Oh, I was correct on the Johns Hopkins, thank you. I doubted myself for a second. So I mentioned earlier that Johns Hopkins no longer factors in the legacy advantage in the admissions process. I doubted myself for a second. Thank you guys so much for making sure and confirming that. And on that note, I think we've got to finish up, but I'll tell you that I'll be doing an Instagram Live on Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as I will be doing every Friday afternoon. So make sure to follow me on Instagram. My handle is at Sara Harberson. And if you can't catch me on Instagram Live, I will be back here once again doing a Facebook Live every single month, answering your questions. And I wish you all the best of luck with the end of the school year, going into summer. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Bye-bye.